They said she'd panic during air raids until she coordinated 50 fighter jets and destroyed an entire enemy air fleet. This story begins at Nellis Air Force Base in Nevada, where Major Rebecca Storm Parker was completing her final evaluation for promotion to the position of Air Operations Center Commander. At 33 years old, Rebecca had an exceptional record: 12 years of service, advanced degrees in aerospace engineering from MIT and tactical operations from the Air War College, and combat experience flying F-16s in 3 different theaters. But her superiors weren't convinced she could handle the pressure of commanding large-scale air operations. "Major Parker," said General William Hawk Mitchell during her final review board, "your technical qualifications are outstanding, but we have concerns about your psychological profile under extreme stress. The Air Operations Center requires someone who can maintain absolute composure while coordinating hundreds of aircraft and thousands of personnel during active combat operations." Rebecca stood at attention in the sterile conference room at Nellis, surrounded by officers who would determine her career trajectory. "Sir, my combat record demonstrates consistent performance under fire. I've led squadron-level operations successfully in hostile environments." Brigadier General Thomas "Iron" Stevens, the current AOC commander, leaned forward with skepticism. "Parker, there's a significant difference between flying a single aircraft in combat and coordinating massive air operations involving multiple services, allied forces, and civilian air traffic. The psychological pressure is exponentially greater. One moment of panic, one emotional decision, and you could cost hundreds of lives." Colonel Sarah Viper Davis, head of combat operations training, added her concerns. "Rebecca, your emotional intelligence scores are actually too high for this position. Research shows that commanders who form emotional connections with their pilots make suboptimal tactical decisions. You care too much about individual lives to make the hard choices required for strategic victory." But Rebecca had studied the psychology of air combat command extensively, and she believed the conventional wisdom was fundamentally flawed. "Ma'am, with respect, I think caring about individual lives is exactly what makes commanders more effective, not less. When you understand the human cost of every decision, you find ways to achieve objectives with minimal casualties. Emotional intelligence isn't a weakness, it's a tactical advantage." 3 months later, Rebecca's theories would be tested in the most challenging circumstances imaginable during Operation Thunderstrike. Intelligence reports had confirmed that the Corvallian Republic was massing the largest air force in their history: over 200 advanced fighter aircraft, 50 strategic bombers, and an integrated air defense network that posed an immediate threat to Allied forces throughout the region. The mission was unprecedented in its scope: neutralize the entire Corvallian Air Force before they could launch preemptive strikes against American bases in the Pacific. Success would require coordinating 50 of America's most advanced fighter jets, F-22 Raptors, F-35 Lightning IIs, and F-16 Fighting Falcons, in the largest air-to-air engagement since World War II. "Major Parker," General Mitchell announced during the emergency briefing at MacDill Air Force Base in Florida, "due to Colonel Stevens's medical emergency, you're being promoted to temporary AOC commander for this operation. I want to be clear, this is the most complex air operation we've attempted in decades. You'll be coordinating aircraft from 4 different air wings, managing real-time intelligence from 6 satellites, and making split-second decisions that will determine the outcome of this conflict." Rebecca felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders, but also a surge of confidence. This was exactly the kind of challenge she had been preparing for her entire career. "Sir, I understand the magnitude of this operation. My team and I are ready." Brigadier General Stevens, participating via video link from Walter Reed Medical Center, couldn't hide his concern. "Parker, I'm serious about the psychological pressure. You'll have 50 pilots' lives in your hands, each aircraft worth $150 million, and the entire strategic balance of the Pacific region depending on your decisions. The Corvallians are experienced, well-equipped, and they've been studying our tactics for years. But Rebecca had spent months developing new approaches to air combat command that integrated emotional intelligence with tactical precision. "Sir, I've analyzed every major air engagement of the past 20 years. The commanders who achieved the best outcomes weren't the ones who ignored the human element. They were the ones who leveraged it most effectively." The operation launched at 0400 hours on a clear Tuesday morning. Rebecca took her position in the state-of-the-art Air Operations Center at MacDill, surrounded by dozens of screens displaying real-time data from across the Pacific Theater. Her team included the Air Force's best tactical analysts, communication specialists, and intelligence officers. But as the 50 American fighters approached Corvallian airspace, Rebecca realized that all the planning in the world couldn't prepare her for the psychological reality of commanding this many lives in mortal combat. "Storm Control, this is Eagle Lead," came the voice of Colonel Jake Ace Morrison, commander of the lead F-22 Squadron. "We're approaching the engagement zone. Enemy contacts on radar. Looks like they're throwing everything they have at us." Rebecca studied her displays with the intensity of a surgeon. The Corvallian Air Force had deployed 180 fighter aircraft in a defensive formation that was both sophisticated and deadly. Their pilots were experienced, their aircraft were modern, and they had the advantage of operating over familiar territory with ground-based radar support. "Eagle Lead, this is Storm Control," Rebecca responded calmly. "I'm seeing the same picture. They've arranged their forces in 3 defensive layers, 60 aircraft at low altitude, 60 at medium altitude, and 60 at high altitude. They're trying to force us into a grinding attrition battle." Captain Maria "Lightning" Rodriguez, flying an F-35, reported in. "Storm Control, Lightning Squadron. We're detecting advanced radar systems that weren't in the intelligence briefings. They've upgraded their capabilities significantly." This was exactly the kind of moment that Rebecca's superiors had worried about, unexpected complications that could cause a commander to panic or make emotional decisions. But Rebecca's extensive study of air combat psychology had prepared her for this exact scenario. "All aircraft, this is Storm Control. I need you to trust me on this. We're not going to engage their formation directly. Instead, we're going to use their tactical discipline against them." Over the next 20 minutes, Rebecca implemented a strategy that no air combat manual had ever described. Instead of attacking the Corvallian formation where it was strongest, she began orchestrating a complex psychological operation designed to exploit the enemy's command structure. "Eagle Squadron, I want you to approach their high-altitude layer but break off just before engagement range. Lightning Squadron, probe their medium-altitude defenses but don't commit. Falcon Squadron, make visible preparations for a low-altitude attack but hold position." Colonel Morrison's voice showed confusion. "Storm Control, these feints aren't accomplishing anything tactically. We're just burning fuel and giving away our positions." But Rebecca could see something on her displays that the individual pilots couldn't. The Corvallian formations were beginning to shift in response to perceived threats. Their rigid defensive structure was starting to fragment as local commanders tried to respond to multiple apparent attacks. "Trust the plan, Eagle Lead. Their command structure is based on centralized control, which means individual squadron leaders can't adapt quickly to unexpected tactics. We're going to create so much confusion that their coordination breaks down." For the next hour, Rebecca conducted what military historians would later describe as a symphony of aerial deception. She moved her 50 fighters like pieces on a 3-dimensional chessboard, creating the appearance of multiple attack patterns while never actually engaging the enemy. But Rebecca's real genius wasn't in the tactical movements, it was in her understanding of human psychology under stress. She had studied recordings of Corvallian radio communications from previous engagements, and she knew exactly how their command structure responded to pressure. "Lightning Squadron, I want you to make a high-speed pass through their medium-altitude layer, but don't engage. Just let them see you coming and going." Captain Rodriguez executed the maneuver perfectly, her F-35 stealth capabilities allowing her to appear and disappear from enemy radar like a ghost. The psychological effect on the Corvallian pilots was immediate. They began calling for reinforcements and repositioning their aircraft to counter a threat that had already vanished. Falcon Squadron, begin electronic jamming of their command frequencies, but only for 30-second intervals. I want to disrupt their communications without making it obvious we're doing it intentionally. Major David Hunter Thompson, leading the F-16 Squadron, implemented the jamming strategy with precision. The intermittent communication disruptions created confusion in the Corvallian ranks without triggering their backup communication protocols. But Rebecca's masterstroke came when she realized that the Corvallian Air Force had a fatal weakness. Their formations were too rigid, their commanders too centralized, and their pilots too disciplined to adapt quickly to unconventional tactics. All squadrons, this is storm control. Phase 2 begins now. I want simultaneous attacks on all 3 altitude layers, but not where they expect them. What happened next would be studied in military academies for decades. Instead of attacking the Corvallian formations head-on, Rebecca's 50 fighters struck at the gaps between formations, exploiting the psychological tendency of defensive formations to focus on protecting their assigned zones rather than adapting to fluid situations. Eagle Squadron hit the transition zone between high and medium altitude. Lightning Squadron strike the flanks of the medium altitude formation. Falcon Squadron attack the rear elements of the low altitude layer. The next 6 hours would become legendary in aviation history. The engagement that followed was unlike anything in the history of air combat. Rebecca's fighters, outnumbered nearly 4-1, began systematically dismantling the Corvallian Air Force through superior coordination and psychological warfare. Storm control, this is Eagle Lead. We've got multiple enemy aircraft breaking formation. They're trying to pursue individual targets instead of maintaining defensive positions. This was exactly what Rebecca had been working toward. By attacking the psychological foundations of the enemy's tactical discipline, she had caused their rigid formation to collapse into individual dogfights where American training and technology advantages would be decisive. All aircraft continue pressure on formation boundaries, force them to choose between maintaining formation integrity and pursuing tactical opportunities. Their command structure can't handle both simultaneously. Over the next 3 hours, Rebecca orchestrated the destruction of the Corvallian Air Force with a precision that amazed even her own pilots. Her emotional intelligence allowed her to predict how enemy commanders would respond to pressure, while her technical expertise enabled her to position American aircraft for maximum advantage. Lightning Squadron reporting 15 confirmed kills. Enemy medium-altitude formation is completely dispersed. Falcon Squadron with 12 confirmed kills. Low-altitude layer is withdrawing toward their home bases. Eagle Squadron accounting for 18 confirmed kills. High-altitude formation has lost all cohesion. But Rebecca's greatest achievement wasn't the tactical victory. It was the way she had minimized American casualties through superior understanding of both her own pilots and the enemy's psychology. Storm Control, this is Eagle 2, called Captain Lisa Phoenix Wang. I've got engine problems, and I'm being pursued by 2 enemy fighters. Request immediate assistance. In this moment, Rebecca faced exactly the kind of emotional decision that her superiors had worried about. She could maintain tactical focus on the larger battle, or she could divert resources to save one pilot who was in immediate danger. Rebecca chose a third option that demonstrated why emotional intelligence was actually a tactical advantage. Lightning 4 and Falcon 7, you're closest to Phoenix's position. Break off your current engagements and provide cover. Eagle Lead, adjust your formation to compensate for the tactical gap. The rescue was executed flawlessly, and Captain Wang made it safely back to base. But more importantly, every pilot in the operation now knew that their commander would move heaven and earth to bring them home safely. This knowledge made them fight harder, take smarter risks, and trust their leader's tactical decisions completely. By the end of the 6-hour engagement, Rebecca had accomplished something unprecedented in modern air warfare: the complete destruction of an enemy air force with minimal friendly casualties. The final tally was devastating for the Corvallians. 156 aircraft destroyed, their entire strategic bomber fleet eliminated, and their air defense network in ruins. American losses were incredibly light, 2 aircraft damaged but recoverable, 0 pilots lost, and all 50 fighters accounted for and returning to base. "All squadrons, this is Storm Control," Rebecca announced as the last enemy aircraft fled toward their home territory. "Mission accomplished. You've just participated in the most successful air engagement in modern military history. Every one of you is coming home tonight, and every one of you should be proud of what we accomplished together." The celebration in the Air Operations Center was immediate and overwhelming. Officers who had questioned Rebecca's emotional fitness for command now watched in amazement as she completed the most complex air operation in decades while bringing every pilot home safely. General Mitchell, who had observed the entire operation from the Pentagon, called Rebecca directly. "Major Parker, Colonel Parker, what you accomplished today will be studied by military historians for generations. You didn't just win an air battle, you revolutionized how we think about air combat command." But perhaps the most meaningful recognition came from the pilots themselves. Colonel Morrison, who had initially questioned Rebecca's unconventional tactics, was the first to congratulate her when he landed. "Storm, I've been flying combat missions for 15 years, and I've never seen anything like what you did today. You didn't just command us, you understood us, you protected us, and you made us all better pilots." Captain Rodriguez echoed the sentiment. "Ma'am, you proved that caring about your people isn't a weakness in command. It's the greatest strength a leader can have." Rebecca's operation became the gold standard for air combat command, fundamentally changing how the Air Force trained its senior officers. Her integration of emotional intelligence with tactical precision proved that understanding human psychology was as important as understanding technology in modern warfare. The techniques she developed during Operation Thunderstrike were incorporated into Air Force doctrine and taught at the Air War College. Her approach to minimizing casualties while maximizing tactical effectiveness became known as Storm Doctrine and was adopted by Allied air forces around the world. But perhaps the most significant change was in how the military evaluated commanders for high-stress positions. Rebecca's success proved that emotional intelligence and empathy weren't disqualifications for command. They were essential qualifications that enabled leaders to achieve better outcomes with fewer casualties. Today, Brigadier General Rebecca Storm Parker commands the Air Force's Advanced Tactical Operations Center, where she trains the next generation of air combat leaders. Her 6-hour engagement over the Pacific is remembered not just as a tactical victory, but as a demonstration that the most effective military leaders are those who understand that technology and human psychology are equally important in modern warfare. And when young officers ask her how she managed to coordinate 50 fighter jets in the most complex air engagement in modern history, Rebecca always gives them the same advice. "Never forget that every aircraft on your screen represents a human being with hopes, fears, families, and dreams. When you truly understand that responsibility, you'll find ways to accomplish the mission while bringing everyone home. Because the greatest victory isn't destroying the enemy. It's protecting your own people while achieving your objectives. Because sometimes the person everyone thinks is too emotional for command is exactly the one who will revolutionize how wars are fought. And sometimes the greatest strength in battle comes from caring too much rather than caring too little."